Welcome to the Business Podcast, where we interview professionals across all industries. Hey, it's Simon. Welcome back. Today we have Louis David Spagnuolo, a professional investor. So happy to have you here with us today. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much. It's a privilege being here.
Absolutely. Let's start off with this question. What's something you could share about yourself that most people don't know?
That most people don't know. That's a tough one because we've done actually a lot of interviews and stuff. I would say that, maybe one of the things people don't know is I think at some point when you reach a level of success in business, you almost have to have a dual personality where you have your professional personality, could be, very extroverted, very dynamic, things like that. And then on a personal side, you're almost like the opposite, and that's something that I am. I'm very introverted. I'm very quiet. I'm very shy in my personal life. I'm very conservative in my personal life, whereas the professional life, sometimes it could be over the top. Sometimes it could be much more dramatic, but it's all done for a reason. And a lot of times it has to do with the marketing of things and connecting with people so you could resonate, because it's hard to be quiet and introverted and basically get your story out to tell about your product or your service that you're trying to sell.
Oh, fantastic. That's great. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about the genesis of you becoming an investor. What is that like? And then perhaps jump into a bit more about your philosophy.
Yeah, I'll tell you how it started. I originally the first business I owned was a restaurant actually in Palm Beach once I graduated college. And I did that for a while. And after about 3 years, I kind of got distasteful of it because I realized that no matter how well I did my job, no matter how well we pleased the people, there was basically a cap on how much money we could make. And what I learned was you want to be in a business that's scalable, where it's not dependent upon the weather, it's not dependent upon how many meals you serve. You want to have it that you could always keep growing it with new ideas, new concepts, and new innovations. So once I sold that restaurant, I got the opportunity in the late 90s during the tech boom to work for a venture capital company. And I thought that was fascinating because I got to see basically 30 companies try to basically start from scratch and build themselves out. The interesting part was everybody that worked at the company assumed they were going to be rich because everybody got stock options. So it was like such an incredible environment. Everybody was always happy, joyful. They're like, it's only a matter of time till we all become millionaires. All these companies are going to do great and everything's going to be, euphoric. And what ended up happening was I helped raise $93 million for these companies. And basically they all went out of business. Every single one. Wow. Which is really amazing when you think of it. You would think out of 30, at least one would make it, and they didn't. And the people that I worked with, my coworkers, were so disappointed. They were crying, they were upset, they weren't gonna be millionaires anymore. And I was like really happy. And I was trying to explain to them that this was the best possible outcome that could have happened. And they looked at me like I was crazy. They're like, all the companies went out of business. How could that have been the best outcome? And I said, because you'll never have a chance in your life, 30 companies fail and see all the mistakes that they made. Because it'd be very hard for one individual to start 30 companies and have them all fail. Like the person would give up after like the fifth one. They'd say, listen, I just don't know how to do this. I don't have the skill set, whatever it is. And they would stop. But we got to see a firsthand account of 30 companies and basically every mistake all of them made. So I was able to take that and then apply it to what I did. So maybe every time I didn't know what exactly to do, but I knew what not to do. And I think that gave me a huge competitive advantage as far as building companies and also investing in companies.
That's a really unique mindset to have in the midst of all that failure that's going on around you. So that happened. What happened next?
Then what happened next is I said, okay, I took all this information and took all the experiences and I said, let me try it on my own. Let me try a company that's scalable because I never had done that before. So we started doing that and I ran into some challenges and it wasn't as easy as I thought. So I made a lot of mistakes and I had a lot of failures. So I was like, wow, this is really tough. I could understand why these 30 companies didn't make it. So I had a tremendous amount of failures in my 20s, I would say. Basically, I failed more than anybody could imagine. I'm probably like the king of failure, for like that 10, 12-year period, whatever it may be. But then after that hard little period, eventually got to the point where between seeing those companies make their mistakes and seeing myself make the mistakes, then what we were able to do was create a recipe for success. And once we created that recipe, we were able to apply it to virtually any vertical we wanted to get into, and the results would pretty much be the same. So it was very painful in the beginning, but if it wasn't for all those mistakes, we would have never been able to come up with the recipe for success, basically. And that's what really I got from it.
That's fantastic. And what comes to mind when I ask what's been one of the bigger wins for you in terms of an investment at that point in time?
I mean, we've had 14 liquidity events, and that may not sound like that much, but over a period of time, that's really, a high number to be able to start a company, build a company, and then sell it. Now, they've all ranged from different exit levels. I think the smallest was maybe 3 million. And then the largest was significant, was 9 figures. So we got to see the difference of how that works, what it takes when you sell a company for 3 million compared to a company for 30 million to 90 million to what have you. So that was a tremendous learning experience. So that's why now, as a professional investor, it gives me a different insight as to how a certain company I could invest in could exit, what the exit may look like, what it's going to involve, how long it's going to take, things like that. I think give me a competitive advantage because I did it on my own with my own businesses. So when I'm investing, I kind of know what to look for, maybe more than the average investor.
And with that in mind, what would you say is your criteria, like for an ideal in investment? What would be your criteria for that?
It's interesting because we call them the 5 golden rules, basically. And I get a ton of pitches for investments. And it basically comes down to for every 200 investment opportunities I see, we'll invest in maybe one of them. So it's a low ratio, basically. To have to go through 200 companies, it's a tedious task, basically, because a lot of the companies don't have the fundamentals for success. So that's why we came up with the 5 golden rules. So we're able to basically tell the startup companies, hey, like this is what our thesis is, this is what our investment criteria is. If you can meet this, then you can take it to the next step. And basically the first one is we always ask, do you have a sustainable competitive advantage? Because we think that's absolutely critical, because most of the companies we see are already going into an industry where there's competitors that already exist and they're already established. So unless you have a sustainable competitive advantage, how are you going to compete with those existing businesses? Because chances are their revenues are already higher than yours. Their costs are lower because they're doing more volume compared to a startup. So you have to have something that's very special, unique, and different, that's sustainable, that'll allow you to create a market niche where you could generate revenue and be successful. So that one's very important. A lot of times people don't understand what a sustainable competitive advantage is. Like they'll tell me that I'm a hard worker. I'm like a really hard worker and I work 7 days a week. That's not a competitive advantage. That's just your work ethic, which is great. That's a characteristic, but it's not an advantage for your company. A sustainable competitive advantage would be like having a patent that only you could sell this one device, this one product, and that's it. There's no one else that could try to compete with you. So that's something we look for. Does this company have patented technology that only they could use, that they could take advantage of? The second one would be, are there any barriers to entry preventing someone that has more money than you to come to market? Because there's always going to be someone that has more money, that's getting funded better, that's raising more money, things like that. So is there a barrier that's going to help either slow them down or completely prevent them from coming into your market segment and competing with you in your niche, which we think is very important. The third one is your product, service, or technology disruptive? So basically, is what you're doing going to mess things up for the way things are being done now? Because like you always have a traditional way of doing things, whatever industry you're in, that kind of goes like this. And is what you guys have going to basically mess all that up and make it so much better? You know what I mean? And that's what all the successful companies have done, whether it's Tesla, Apple, Amazon. they've messed it up for basically everybody in their industry. And they made it very difficult to compete against them because their product or service is so different, it's so unique. It creates a challenge for the existing, companies in that vertical. The next one is the model scalable? And is there a clear exit strategy? Because sometimes people bring us businesses and there's really no exit strategy for the business. There's no buyer that's going to eventually buy this company 5 years from now. It could be like a nice business, you can make a nice salary, but there could be in an industry where there's really no exit to it. So we always want to be in an industry where there's a definite finite industry exit that either, a private equity company could buy, one of your competitors could buy. We'd like to have as many potential buyers as possible for whatever company we invest in or we do. And then the last one we think is very important is basically have the people running the company actually done this before and have been in this industry. A lot of times we'll talk to like young entrepreneurs and they have never been in the industry. They don't know anything about it. And they think that they have some type of solution. And one of the examples I could give you is we're very interested in the liquor segment, the liquor vertical with, alcohol basically. And we found this company that basically was created by a group of engineers and scientists, and they wanted to sell alcohol. They wanted to sell bourbon, they wanted to sell wine, they wanted to sell sake, things like that. But they knew nothing about that whole beverage industry. So what they created didn't connect with the industry because they were coming from like a scientific engineering standpoint versus, a beverage, liquor, spirits, and wine, whiskey standpoint. So it was very hard to invest in a company like that when they know nothing about that industry. So those are really the 5 things we look for. And it's challenging for young companies to be able to say yes to all 5 of those. Like a lot of times we'll get companies that have 3 out of 5 and they'll say, is that good enough? And we'll say, no, that's not good enough. You have to have all 5 because like, think about it. If you're going to invest your own money in someone and you would want them to at least have done it before once. You know what I mean? Like if someone's going to do heart surgery on you, you're probably not going to pick someone that's never done heart surgery before. You're going to pick someone that's done heart surgery 100 times because you're going to trust them, because you're going to know they know how to do it. They have the experience, the expertise, stuff like that. So it's really no different when you invest in a company. If the people that are running the company have never been in that industry and know nothing about it, their chances of success are much lower.
That's certainly true. Could you talk about, and you can be as specific as you like, one of the investments that you've recently made that met that criteria and that ended up being successful?
One of them that we did, basically an artificial intelligence company, and they had some incredible patents for basically taking massive amounts of information and then simplifying them and doing it in a very economical and efficient way where they could sell to a broad base of customers and not just gigantic, big multinational companies. And we felt like right now, most of the companies that are doing AI is like IBM, General Electric, companies that are just massive. But there's also a lot of little companies, small to medium companies that have tremendous data that they don't know how to leverage. So when we saw that they were able to do this with an easy interface, interact, easy to learn, intuitive, things like that, that it could go to a broad range of companies, we said, okay, this makes sense. All these guys have worked for AI companies in the past, so they know the vertical. They have a competitive advantage with the patents they have. There's barriers to entry because it's going to be hard for someone to replicate it. It'll be easier for someone to buy their company. So then that gives us a clear exit strategy. And then obviously it's scalable because you could sell this all over the world.
Definitely. And how about a story that comes to mind that's either funny or very interesting for a deal that just went all the way wrong, or maybe it went right, but there were some funny instances along the way? Anything comes to mind? I'm seeing you laughing. So
there's like so many where we've gotten like these crazy pitches, that we just had to laugh. And like, I probably shouldn't even say this, but there's been times we've actually done, Zoom calls or conference calls just because like what they were basically proposing was so unrealistic. I wanted my team to actually see it because they were so far-fetched in their thinking that I felt it was important for them to see, the complete polar opposite of one side versus the other opposite would be the guys that really know how to do it. So I almost think there's a value in talking and seeing people that are just completely off base with what their philosophy is and how they think they're going to build this company and things like that. And then you could see the other way. So now you could combine both and get a good feel. But we've looked at so many different deals. I mean, we've had oil refineries in Sierra Leone and Africa. I mean, it's just, I could go on and on about some of the crazy things that we've done. Typically, we try to cut it off pretty quick because time is really valuable. So we go through the 5 golden rules. We kind of get an idea doing some initial due diligence. So we don't let it go as long as maybe we did in the past. But there's been a lot of crazy ideas that people have come up with, that we've had to, kind of laugh about, and just kind of say, wow, that was funny. But, you learn from them. You learn from all of them, whether they're great ideas or they're poor ideas. What people sometimes don't realize is, especially young entrepreneurs, they're very stubborn in their vision for something. They could have something that sounds crazy and wacky that would never be successful. But if they were able to retreat, recalibrate, and then re-engage, they'd have a much better chance of hitting the target, hitting the bullseye. But because they're so close-minded and they just think they know what's right and what the customer wants, and they think they have all the answers, the young entrepreneurs sometimes don't realize that if they just shift a little, they actually may have something. So that's one of the things we encounter a lot too. Like, there's a lot of stubbornness with young entrepreneurs where they feel like they know more than the investors, or better than the investors, or better than really the customers, because the customers are the ones that really make the decisions. And that's why we always use like focus groups, and we always test market things. And, because I tell everyone all the time, like, I don't know how much something should be priced at. How should I know? I'm just guessing. You know what I mean? So let's give it to 20 people. Let's let them look at it and let's get their feedback. Someone may think it's worth $30. Someone may think it's worth $40. But by getting that sampling and getting that data, that helps us make smarter investments. And what we found is a lot of the younger entrepreneurs don't want to do that. They just want to say, hey, we know the market wants this. We know the market's going to pay this. We know these are the features that the market wants, and we're just going to try to sell it. And I think that's being very, naive in a sense, where it should be more of the attitude like, hey, we don't know anything. Let's learn what the market wants, and then let's deliver it to them.
Yeah, that's a really important aspect of validating the idea, making sure that the market actually thinks this is important to them and they'd be willing to pay for it.
Exactly.
With the insight that you have and the experiences that you have, if you were a young budding entrepreneur right now and you could jump into any industry or vertical, what first comes to mind?
That's a tough one. That's definitely a tough one. I think really what it should go by is what the individual's passion is, because you can make a case saying real estate's a great industry to go into when you're young. If you're passionate about real estate, and someone might say, well, that's not really technology based or digital, whatever, but it's still something that's scalable that you could build a huge real estate empire. You know what I mean? Or it could be like I just said, with the artificial intelligence. I think that's a future technology. I think anything that we're going to be using in the future is something that I would want to do as a young entrepreneur, because most likely that vertical is very immature, very nascent, just starting out. And that gives you a better chance of success versus going into a very mature industry and trying to compete against massive competitors that have been there for so long. So I would try to pick an industry or a vertical that's very new, that's maybe not mainstream right now at the moment, but in 5 years will become mainstream.
Yeah, that goes back to that idea of 5 years from now, what's going to be relevant, and that's always a good gauge from technology perspective.
Exactly. So I think it's the combination of that, and then where do your passions lie? I mean, I think that's what's important. Like, you have to like the vertical that you're in to at least a certain degree. So for everybody, it could be different. It just really depends.
Yeah. How about? Go ahead.
For me personally, like it's gone to the point where it's almost like a numbers game, where it's like, okay, what vertical is going to fit this recipe the best to allow us to basically bake the most cookies? And those are the verticals that I'm attracted to. Because we kind of feel like business is almost all the same right now. It's become so homogeneous. You know what I mean? There's really not that much difference in different verticals and different businesses. So let's apply the formula and let's see what's going to make it the most efficient. Let's go in an industry that we know there's big profit margins. Like that's something that's important to us, because we feel if you're in a vertical where there's very low profit margins, you could end up getting squeezed very quickly, especially if your competitors have more money than you. Whereas if you're in a vertical that has very good margins, it gives you much more flexibility. It allows you much more marketing flexibility, and it gives you, I think, a better chance for success. So that's also another aspect that we look at, how profitable is this vertical? And then how profitable is it going to continue to be down the road?
Are there any particular sectors and verticals that you personally have more experience doing deals in successfully and might prefer to entertain versus others?
Digital, definitely. Internet, anything that's like lead based, lead generated. I'm a big believer in coming to work every day and have, 10 customers that want your product. And basically the way we describe that is there's the hunter model and then there's the trapper model. And you always want to be a trapper. You never want to be a hunter. And I'd say like 90% of the people out there that are working, they're hunting. They're hunting for new business. They're hunting for new clients. They wake up early in the morning. They meet someone at Starbucks for breakfast trying to get business. They go to the office. They're emailing people for business. They go to a lunch meeting trying to get business. They go back to the office. They're constantly hunting for business. So it's almost like you wake up in the morning, you put on your little hunting outfit, you take your shotgun with you, and you go out in the forest and you're trying to like hunt some type of animal so you could drag it back and bring it to the cabin and what have you. Whereas us, what we rather do is we rather plant traps all around the forest in the morning, spend the whole day in the morning planting traps. And then in the afternoon, we see the animals that are trapped in there and we drag them back. We feel that that's much more efficient. So we want to go into a vertical where every day we come to work, we already have 10 people that want our product or service. And then it's just a question of us selling it to them, because we think it's too hard in the environment we have today to try to hunt business, because everybody's hunting business. Like if you go on LinkedIn, everybody's trying to like get your business and they're all hunting. Instead they should have people coming to them and then trying to sell their product. And that's where I think one of the big disconnects is where years ago, 20, 30 years ago, you could go to a happy hour after work and network with someone and, find someone that wants your product or service. But nowadays, everything's so digital, it's done over Zoom. There's less human interaction. Everything's done online. You meet people online through LinkedIn or through one of the social media platforms. There's really no meeting for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner, for after drinks, things like that. It's just not efficient enough. Whereas online, you can meet people not just from your localized area, but from the whole country and the whole world. So if you could put a system together to do that consistently, to find people that want your product or service, you're going to be much more successful.
Definitely. Thanks for sharing that. And the way you put it was actually very insightful. What about the opposite end? Are there any industries where you feel you'd like to have a better understanding or a more expert knowledge on? Does anything come to mind?
Nothing comes to mind specifically, but I always like talking to students at universities that are studying new topics that maybe I'm not familiar with, that they feel eventually could be monetized somehow, that may not be monetized now per se. And I think I found like engineers and scientists are groups of people that are overlooked in the business community that a lot of times have something that's very unique and very interesting, but because they don't have the business mindset, they're never able to monetize it. And I feel that's a really good way for investors to create companies and to invest in companies, because they're looking at it from a different angle. A business person is looking at it strictly from a business angle, whereas like a scientist or an engineer is looking to create something unique, innovate something, do something differently than the way it's doing now, but they may not have the confidence or the expertise or the experience to basically create a business around that and bring it to market. So that's a great opportunity where you have a businessman here and then you have like a scientist engineer here. And when they come together, then you could have something very special.
Yeah, that's a really great perspective. Yeah, I think a lot of colleges have tons of great budding brains of students with tons of
Exactly.
ideas, but they don't necessarily have that other skill to balance it out. So it's
Exactly.
cool
And
that
then
you
what we
recognize
found,
it.
there's a lot of colleges and students that create patents, and they'll develop incredible patents, but then they won't know what to do next. And what people don't realize is 99% of the patents in the world never generate a dollar, never generate any income. And some of the reasons why is they're not, monetizable in a sense. And then the other reason why is the people don't have the skill set to actually do it, because there's a lot of great patents out there that are at universities and colleges, but they don't know how to take the next step. So it could be like the medical industry. It could be, it could be really anything where someone's come up with something that's unique, that's different, but they're missing that other piece, so to speak. And that's where I feel there's a big opportunity. And we get a lot of our best deals from universities and colleges because they do put a high value on patent. And those are the ones that help us go to market faster, help us be more disruptive, and allow us to have a quicker exit strategy.
That's certainly a different approach than what is the norm. So thanks for sharing
Right.
that insight.
Yeah,
Um,
and that's what I think is important, because you have to realize too, you have everybody trying to do the same thing, basically on the same road. It becomes very difficult. So if you take a slightly different path, you're going to have a much higher percentage of success than trying to compete, with everybody. If everybody's on one island, maybe you should try going to a different island, and maybe it's not as developed or mainstream or something like that, but you could have much more opportunity. So you have to open yourself to thinking like that.
yeah. So on that note, opening your mind up to thinking, let me throw a little bit of a curveball question here.
Okay.
You can connect with anyone at any point in history, and
Right.
the setting is they're your best friend,
Right.
and you're hanging out with them for the day. Who is it, and what are you doing?
I'll tell you, I would never pick a business person in a sense, because like my whole life is dominated by business. That's like, I'd almost want to like take a break, because I talk business so much. So I'd want to pick someone that's in some industry or vertical that's completely different than anything I would ever enter. And, a lot of people are probably going to laugh, but the person I would pick would be Elvis Presley, the singer. And I would pick him because I felt he lived such a dynamic life, starting with nothing and then becoming the biggest star in the world, maybe even the biggest star in history as far as an entertainer and a singer. And then look at all the challenges and trials and tribulations he went through, during his career. And then also all the philanthropy he did with the amount of people that he helped, and the cars that he bought for people, and all the beautiful things that he's done that most people don't know because they just see him as a singer and not as a human. He's someone I'd want to sit down and talk to and ask, hey, what did that feel like? What was it like to be able to, buy all your friends new cars, new Cadillacs, new whatever? How was it to get like the first private jet that was, 727? That was big back then in the time. What was that experience like to do movies and to do music and, to do, like back in the day, they used to do closed circuit television. They didn't have pay-per-view. So he would like do a concert, like in Hawaii, let's say, and 90 million people would watch this one concert, which is like unheard of today, because now like pay-per-view numbers, the most you ever get for pay-per-view is like 3 million people. And back all these years ago, he was getting 90 million, which is incredible. So to talk to someone like that in an industry that I know nothing about, that's completely different than what I'm used to, I just feel it'd be so fascinating, because I feel like I'd be able to pull some of the things they do in that industry and then apply it to some of the things we do in our industries. And as crazy as that sounds, because he did so many unique things that were innovative, by using the closed circuit TV, with using technology, with doing things back then that was just unheard of. So I think that would be really a fun, interesting person to spend some time with and just, understand their life. He went to the military, he was in the army, like he did so many things, during the course of his life. And then he had so many struggles and adversities. I just think those are the people that I gravitate towards. The ones that started with nothing, had it really difficult, got success, and had to go through those challenges, because you learn how they were able to overcome those challenges. You could apply it to your life and to your business.
Yeah. Oh, that's incredible. I never knew that about Elvis. Like
Yeah,
all
no, it's an
those
incredible story.
details.
Just,
That is,
incredible story, like his generosity and just the things that he did for people. He helped so many people that are sick, so many children. He'd go to so many hospitals, all the behind the scenes things that no one would see. And then also the challenges he would have where he couldn't like go out in public or he couldn't go places because people would just, go crazy. Just to learn what that must have felt like, I think would be fascinating.
yeah, definitely, definitely. Um, let's ask this question here, and that is your perfect day. Maybe it's a mix of work and relaxation. Maybe it's all work. Maybe it's all relaxation. What's a perfect day look like?
Here's what I can tell you. What I can tell you is every day I get out of bed and I put my foot on the floor, I know that I have 40 problems every day. Every day I wake up, and I stand up in my bedroom, I know I have 40 problems I have to deal with before the day even starts. So that's kind of how the day starts for me typically. And then we spend most of the morning solving those problems, and then most of the afternoon trying to advance whatever our objectives may be, for whatever verticals we're focusing on. So the perfect day for me would be not to have those 40 problems when I wake up in the morning, not to really have to do anything business related or talk to anybody with business or deal with, babysitting people or whatever it may be, and just be able to relax somewhere like at the pool or on vacation, on an island or something, and drink, margaritas and just kind of like take it all in and enjoy it more and be more grateful and not take it so much for granted. Because I think a lot of times we could go, so fast with things and constantly be on the move and like everything's business. It's 24 hours a day now business. I mean, we do business at 3 a.m, 4 a.m, different countries, different time zones. We could do Zoom calls all over the world. Like there's no limit now. So it could get to the point where it's like, it's never ending. You can literally do business 24 hours a day now. There's nothing stopping it. Whereas years ago, once you left the office, that was it. People couldn't get a hold of you. Like there was no cell phones, there was no iPhones, there was no emails, text messages, Zoom calls. I mean, it didn't exist. Whereas now, I think it becomes really unhealthy, especially during these times with COVID, where there's very little human reaction. Like a lot of times I find myself doing Zoom calls the entire day. And it's almost like I feel like I'm a robot. Like I'm not even like a human anymore. Like I'm not even looking at people. I'm not interacting with them. I'm just looking at a screen all day long. So my perfect day would be to try to get as far away from all that as possible and just to be able to relax and kind of take it all in and appreciate all of it. Because I think sometimes we take certain things for granted and time goes by so quickly that we should be enjoying that moment more. And that's one of the things I learned as I got older is to try to enjoy every moment, whether it's good or bad. Try to enjoy it because life is so short. And when you look back on it, you're gonna be like, man, I wish I just didn't take that for granted so much. I wish I, really enjoyed every second of that when we were going through those trials and tribulations, or we had that success, or we had that victory. A lot of times you just get caught up because there's so much going on. So I'd really like to just have a day where I could just like relax, think about everything, think about some of the victories we've had, think about some of the failures, and just kind of like take it all in and absorb it and not have to worry about, all the problems that we're having during a normal day.
fantastic. On that note, it was phenomenal speaking with you. That's such a powerful message. I think that's a good thing for people to be left with for now. But until we connect again next time, perhaps you could share a final parting thought, and we can take it from there.
What I would tell people, like the advice I would give people nowadays, and you touched on it a little earlier, is whatever industry or vertical you're going into, whatever business it may be, always try to seek out the person that's done it before. Don't seek out the person that's trying to sell you success or trying to sell you like this, fake mirage of ideas and concepts that may sound good, you know what I mean? But in reality don't work, and just make believe things that people have come up with. And one of the small examples I tell people all the time is I hate it when people tell me to think big. Like I hear that all the time. Like, I don't know who came up with that, but like, you got to think big. You got to think big. Whatever you do, you got to think big. And to me, that's the biggest mistake you can make in business. So whoever came up with that should go like straight to jail or something, because they're screwing it up for everybody. Because I tell people what you should do is you should think very small, and you should make very small objectives. and very small targets. Because then if you do those, you're going to accomplish those objectives and those targets. You're going to get victories, and you're going to start building momentum. Because no one's ever been able to climb a mountain with one step. No one's ever been able to do that. It's always you start at base camp, you go to camp 2, you go to camp 3, camp 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then you make it to the peak of the mountain. And I think people get caught up with this thinking big thing where they're like, okay, the first day we're going to climb the mountain. And then they have failure, and then they get frustrated, and they start, getting dissatisfied with what they're trying to do. Whereas if they had smaller ambitions and goals and then have big dreams, like you should dream big is what you should do, but you shouldn't think big. You should think small and dream big. So you could always have an end goal where you want to be in life as far as success or things that you want, but break it down into small pieces and think really small. Because if you think really small, you'll hit those objectives, and it'll allow you to be successful more efficiently and faster. And I think that's one of the big things a lot of people, get confused with when they hear, you got to think big. You got to think big with your project. And, I'll see people doing projections where they're a startup company. In the first year, they're doing 60 million. And I'm like, this is crazy. Like, this is irrational. This is never going to happen. Make more realistic goals that you could hit. Because then once you do that, you build momentum, you get a good energy, and you start getting more confident, and you see yourself on the right path. Whereas if you try to bake the cookies in 30 seconds, chances are they're not going to come up that good. But if you take the right time and follow all the steps and follow the recipe, your chances are going to be much, much bigger. So all these people that say, hey, you got to think big and you got to think big. I think that's the biggest mistake, to be honest with you.
Fantastic speaking with you, Louis. Until next time, thanks so much.
Fantastic. Grateful. Appreciate it.
Cheers.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for attending the Business Podcast, and stay tuned for more episodes.